Hi, I'm Oliver Sadie and I'm delighted to provide this video interview for the Audio Spotlight. Thank you very much, Paisley and Stravko. I compose music for film and TV. I am a pianist and a complete SoundCloud junkie. I'm a father of 3 and I live west of London, just in a suburb called Maidenhead. I suppose my niche or speciality is piano improvisation. And that may not seem an obvious starting point for a film composer or someone who's writing music for the screen, but it's actually an integral part of my workflow, and I'll go through a bit of that a little later. In terms of equipment, this is my humble home studio. I have a Weber Baby Grand 150 here. It's mic'd up with 2 Rode NT5s which plug into my audio interface there. That's wired up to my Mac Pro, which has got Cubase and a bunch of sample libraries. My primary MIDI input is this Clavinova, which has got fully weighted keys, and it's a really natural input for performance and for getting an expressive feel out of the music. I have a MIDI controller keyboard here on the left, which gives me my pitch bend, my modulation, my faders, and a bunch of other production controls. At the top of the list of my sample libraries is LA scoring strings, not only for solo but for ensemble work. It's a truly powerful kit that I've gotten to know quite well over the last 2 years, and I especially like using the cello sounds. My wife is a cellist, and it's always a challenge to create a sound using this library that makes her nod her head and say, yeah, that sounds reasonably realistic. In terms of brass and winds, I use Kirk Hunter, which is a great little product, but I'm quite keen on looking at Cinebrass, which seems to be quite a compelling alternative, or addition to my brass library rather. Then for winds I use Hollywood winds. For electronic and synth side of things, I tend to use Omnisphere quite heavily, which I'm sure many of you have. It's a fantastic product, extremely versatile and enormous, just physically enormous. Plugins wise, very simple. I tend to use a lot of what's already built into Cubase in terms of EQ and compression, limiting, all those basic mastering functions. But for reverb, my go-to is Valhalla Room and Valhalla Shimmer. It's a cheap and cheerful product, but incredibly versatile and very controllable to get the exact sound that you want. I find myself most creative in the midnight hours. I'm very much more of an owl than a lark. I work from around 10 PM till around 2 AM most days of the week or weekend. It's a nice quiet stretch that I can get things done without an interruption from family or any other commitments. My usual process for creating audio to sync to visuals is to begin with a piano improvisation, almost all the time. So the first step when receiving visuals is to, especially for a film, is to make a bunch of spotting notes, figure out when the music starts, when the music stops, what the content of that music should be, and weaving around themes that either relate to characters or to scenes. And to start off with that list of spotting notes, and then for each of those I go through and play something just off the cuff on the piano, something completely improvised. Piano improvisation is very much a core skill of mine, which I've been working on for many years, and which I encourage anybody to try and develop. To be able to create and compose real time is incredibly useful for this business. What it gives you is a natural response and expression to what's happening on the screen. So if you, I mean, you can always go back and edit later if you fluff and do multiple takes, but the point is, if you've got the visuals and the emotional content right there on the screen, and you can translate that into something workable on the piano immediately, it makes an enormous difference to the emotional impact of the soundtrack that you're writing. That's my general approach. Once I've got the piano part laid out as an improvisation, I can then build on it with orchestral or synth layers, chop it up, and work on it from there. But I find that improvisation is a real key part of the process for me. Are there any secrets to my creativity? Not really, but I feel very uninhibited when I approach a musical instrument, whether it's putting something in via MIDI through my sample libraries or putting something on the piano here. And that lack of fear of judgment for what sounds you're making is core to being able to make new sounds and be creative and not just walk the well-trodden routes. Often it's worth walking the well-trodden routes, don't get me wrong, especially for commercial projects where there's a very specific sound in demand. But generally, the more expressive, the more emotionally substantial pieces of music are going to come from those moments where you're not afraid to just let it go, to just let your passion speak its message on whatever instrument you're playing. This next question is about audio creation techniques that resulted in something interesting. This technique is now getting more and more well known, but that's using SoundCloud as a collaboration tool. I'm a huge flag flyer for SoundCloud. I don't get paid by SoundCloud. I'm not affiliated with them in any way, but I'm a huge fan of the platform and what it has done to my musical career and how many opportunities it has opened for collaboration. So specifically in terms of techniques, I'd say using SoundCloud as an audio sharing platform in private mode is very useful for extremely fast collaboration, because you can sure, with Dropbox and other alternatives you can dump a file and somebody can pick it up and play it, but of course with SoundCloud you can provide timed feedback on that private track and say, actually, could you just play this a key up, or this part here, can we move the bridge a couple of bars later, download the full quality WAV and drop it into your own project file, share it to a small number of people. SoundCloud is really the core to most of my collaborations, and a tool that I absolutely cannot work without. Any specific lessons learned? I think the biggest lesson for me has been to try and contribute more to the project you're working on than music. To try and see a little beyond the composer mandate that you've been given. Write this piece of music, it's going to be for this part on the screen, it's going to have this specific emotional content. That's a given. You need to be able to do that. But what I feel strongly about is that you need to understand the project as a whole. Try sympathize with the director's point of view, with the producer's point of view. Get to know them, make those social connections. I know every director and producer of every commercial project that I've worked on in the last 3 years. I've made it my point to do so, and it's opened up opportunities for me to do things that I wouldn't be doing. My involvement in a web series coming up called After Hell is not merely that of a composer. I've introduced people to the project that are part of the cast, part of the crew. I'm managing a large part of the funding initiative that's going to bring this thing to life, and that's a result of asking questions. Just go beyond, write this music for that piece. As a final note, I just want to reiterate what so many composers have already said on the Audio Spotlight here in terms of the process of getting to where you want to be. It's very slow burn. I've been writing music for commercial purposes for 3 years. Before that, I did a lot of music for the sheer pleasure and enjoyment of it. At the beginning of this interview, I introduced myself as a composer, as a pianist, and as a SoundCloud junkie, but really, I'm not, I don't make a full living out of any one of those things. I make a decent income at the moment from music, but nowhere near enough to pay all the bills that I need to, and where I can break even to be able to do that is still going to be another 2 or 3 years ahead. That's really difficult. It's a difficult process for any composer, but it's been absolutely fantastic to see people around me, their career blossoming. So many examples spring to mind. My friend Dirk Ehlert, who's moving from film to an A-list film, which I'm not supposed to talk about, so I'm not going to say anything about. But he started where I am. I mean, I'm say 2 or 3 years behind him in terms of what I'm doing. I've got few bits of library work going on, the odd short film, 1 or 2 feature films, a couple of commercial spots. Really limited, small pieces of work, but they're accumulating and they're getting bigger. And I'm placing myself on this curve in relation to composers that are ahead of me, and it's really inspiring because I see them achieving these things. Russell Bell is another great example of this kind of thing. It's a long, slow burn process, but if you love what you're doing, it's worth it, and your dreams will materialize of making this thing your life.